Americans rise in righteous anger, and sometimes it's driven by misinformation. And it's wonderful to be patriotic and wave the flag. Unfortunately, sometimes that flag can knock people over.
The Crow Indians called this a sacred place, one filled with a spiritual energy. They named it Heart Mountain. It proudly sits here, watching over a fierce land, with its rugged terrain, bitter cold, cutting winds. A land known for struggle and hardship.
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone.
120,000 people of Japanese descent along the West Coast were taken out of their homes and forced into concentration camps across the country. One of them placed right here.
This is where it sat. Today it's thousands of acres of hayfields where the wind constantly blows. But 70 years ago, there were barracks here, all neatly lined up, all in the shadow of Heart Mountain.
This is my dad in Heart Mountain, and I really like this picture because he's holding his camera and you can see Heart Mountain in the background.
Orange County's Patty Hirahara has a remarkable story to tell. Her grandfather and father were avid photographers. When they were sent to Heart Mountain, her grandfather, without being detected, built a darkroom.
That darkroom was supposedly a well-kept secret. The key is that my grandfather built it under his own barrack apartment. He did it in secret. So my grandfather built this trapdoor.
George Hirahara accomplished this by quietly digging a hole under his barracks and then building it with wood scraps he collected around camp. This is George in that darkroom. He and his son Frank, who was just in high school at the time, would sneak down there at night.
When it got dark at night, my dad, his friends, my grandfather would go down and develop negatives and make prints.
Over the next 3 years, George and Frank, Patty's grandfather and father, would take more than 2,000 photos of life inside Heart Mountain. 2,000 moments captured behind barbed wire that gives us a much better understanding of what life was like. A total of 14,000 people were held at Heart Mountain, 10,000 at any given time. All of them ripped from their homes, their jobs, their schools, forced to leave behind everything they owned. They were homesick, trying to exist in this environment the best they could. Patty didn't even know the collection existed until just a few years ago. Her father and grandfather had already passed.
And so I went up to the attic and I found a small blue box. And in this blue box on the end said Heart Mountain.
Inside were negatives.
I could tell that these were school shots, these were people's portraits, these were specific incidents of camp like Japanese dancing during the summer in Obon, and pictures of dinners and pictures of wedding announcements. It was fantastic.
Patty has been studying the photos, trying to identify the people in them. At the Japanese American National Museum in downtown Los Angeles, we witness a reunion of sorts. People once held at Heart Mountain, now 70 years later, take a trip back in time through this photo collection.
When I look at this now, it rekindles a lot of memories for me.
This is 88-year-old George Yoshinaga. He still writes a column for the Rafu Shimpo, a Japanese American newspaper out of LA.
Were there a lot of folks from Los Angeles in Heart Mountain?
Yeah, I would say 80%.
There were more Japanese in Los Angeles than in any other area. We knew that some among them were potentially dangerous.
George was 18 at the time and became one of the stars of the Heart Mountain High School football team. Patty's father captured photos of him on the gridiron, and his memory is remarkable.
Now that's you running.
I'm on defense in this particular play. This was against Lovell, and we beat them 7-0.
Football was his escape. Even though they were held at a concentration camp, they were allowed to play the local high schools as long as those schools came to the camp. His team went undefeated.
They probably couldn't play their best game because they would come to camp and the fans circling the field were all Japanese faces. They couldn't imagine that we know how to play football because most of the people thought that we were really Japanese, you know. They were totally amazed at, said, geez, I didn't know Japanese knew how to play football.
It was a telling lesson for the visiting teams. These were not enemy aliens. They were Americans.